Should the Baltimore Ravens sign Odell Beckham Jr.? We talk about that and more next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. And of course, we are a daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. We're back here with another week of Ravens talk. Some drama happening over the weekend with a certain take from a certain analyst at ESPN. We're going to dive into that in the first part of the show here, talk about just what it is with Lamar Jackson that attracts all this negative media attention and all of these narratives surrounding him. It's a conversation we've had before, but now there is new material, so we will talk about that in the first segment. In the second segment, we'll continue what I've been doing for, the past couple of Mondays, which is, should the Ravens sign X receiver? And this week is going to be Odell Beckham Jr. I think this is going to be the last one. Then in the final segment, I want to talk a bit about a scheduling, tidbit that I found, a little cool tidbit. And actually it dates back to last year as well, and kind of talking about how the Ravens had to travel. So we'll talk about the Ravens traveling in the final segment as it relates to their schedule, how far they have to travel, how that impacts the team, etc. So a ton to talk about here today. But before we dive into the content, if you're here with us on YouTube in video form, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a ton. I greatly appreciate it. We're building a community really, really fast here, and it's been amazing to see the YouTube growth here. Ever since we started off in early September, our next goal here on Locked On Ravens, 2,000 subscribers. So thank you if you've already subscribed to this channel. I appreciate you. And also, if you're thinking about it, you're wondering, well, why should I subscribe? We put out daily Ravens content 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. And again, if you don't see this show in audio form and for some reason it's not up, it will be here on YouTube. But if you hear this in audio form, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you as well. Be sure to follow us, and also be sure to follow anywhere you get those podcasts and turn notifications on. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter at CashRecord34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's now talk about the take from Diana Russini from ESPN. And this was a take that Diana Russini got a lot of flack for. I think that when talking about Lamar Jackson, there are always these, I guess they're narratives. And these narratives continue to get used over and over and over again. And it's stuff that has either been never true, like this is stuff that hasn't been true at all, or it's stuff that maybe his rookie season he struggled with a little bit, but people are still bringing it up now in his fifth year. So pretty much what Diana Russini said, and it's about the video that was put out was about 30 seconds, I think, like 32 seconds. He's pretty much saying after ESPN played highlights of him running, it was pretty much Diana Russini talking about how, well, what did we see there? It was running, and these quarterbacks getting paid not because they run, but because they can throw from the pocket. And Lamar Jackson, can't. She didn't say he can't throw from the pocket, but she's pretty much talking about how he's not up to par as a pocket passer. Stuff that is just blatantly not true. The stats back that up. The film backs that up. Everybody's entitled to their opinions. I'm not trying to shoot down her right to have an opinion on stuff, but it's just like it feels like it's wrong. And it doesn't feel like it's wrong. It is wrong. Like it is a wrong take to have. Like you can think what you want about Lamar Jackson, right? But if the stats back it up, the film backs it up. Lamar Jackson is a pocket passer. He is very, very good in the pocket. And this was like a lot of Twitter like united to pretty much disclaim this take and be like, hey, this is like not true. You have analysts talking about, like Matt Waldman saying not a well-researched take. Lamar Jackson insanely good in the pocket. His velocity on perimeter throws require a lower trajectory. That isn't his strength, but the pocket management and efficiency has been a strength even at Louisville. And then that's the thing. Even dating back to college, Lamar Jackson's like quote unquote play style, right? Oh, he's such a good runner. That means he can't throw the football. And it's all this different stuff that we hear over and over and over and over again. And it's like the pocket passer stuff is something where it's like, he's going to get paid. And part of the reason is because he's a good thrower of the football, right? A lot of the reasons because he's a good thrower of the football. Part of it's his dynamic running ability, right? That's a part of his game, but it's not the only part of his game. We have seen time and time and time again Lamar Jackson winning with his arm, right? It's not like, oh, well, Lamar Jackson has amassed this amazing record as a starter just because he runs the ball 30 times a game. He doesn't even run the running with Lamar Jackson is something that I think gets wrongly just stigmatized, wrongly, I think just not, it's something that I think hasn't gotten the publicity I think it should. Like, it's a part of the game. It's not his entire game. Just because Lamar Jackson can run the football well does not mean that all of a sudden he can't throw it well. Like, he's allowed to do both well, and he's shown that he can do both well. So when people are talking about, yeah, well, the quarterbacks that getting paid are the ones that can pass in the pocket. Awesome. Lamar Jackson's going to get paid then because he can pass in the pocket. So Diana Rossini's a credible reporter, but I just think that in this instance, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the clip. I don't know. And she responded to a tweet from Sarah Ellison. I'm actually going to pull that one up right now because Sarah Ellison talked about how this take was wrong. She laid out reasons, right? Very, very structured, and saying, stop watching selected clips and only highlight running and start watching the games, right? And that's what she said to Diana Rossini. And Diana Rossini responded and said, "Thanks for your advice. I'm clear and correct based on reporting how he's viewed. Also, he's going to get paid, no doubt." So I guess what she's saying is this is how he's viewed from people who she has talked to. Like, maybe I'm interpreting that wrong personally, but I think that's what she's saying. But again, Lamar Jackson's not this traditional pocket passer who's going to sit in there and never run around, never do his thing. That's what makes Lamar Jackson a good football player. The fact that he can be so effective with his arm and he can be so effective with his legs. Now, is he a perfect passer? No. Does he still have things to work on? Absolutely. I'm not saying that he's a perfect passer, the best quarterback in the league, right? There are still things he has to do, milestones he has to hit in order to get to that mark. And, is he the best at a lot of other things? No, but he is a great football player, someone who I think is underappreciated because people are so stuck in well, he can't throw the football. The accuracy isn't there. This take and that take, which either one, never was a problem, or two, were issues his rookie year and then were evaporated. And that's that. So when Lamar Jackson throws an interception, right, or when Lamar Jackson makes a bad decision, a lot of the blame seems to shift and fall on him. And I'm not saying that he is clear of all blame, right? Some of the throws he makes, some of the decisions he makes, sure, right? They're bad ones. Everybody's allowed to have bad decisions. Everybody's allowed to have bad throws. But you see it a lot more often with Lamar Jackson. At least I see it, where he'll throw an interception, make a bad decision. It'll all fall on him. Someone else will do something similar or worse, and it'll be, oh, well, you'll get him next time, or it was the receiver's fault, or oh, it wasn't that guy's fault. It was this other guy's fault. So again, I don't know what it is with him, but he's tuned out that noise. He's responded to people, right? He's gotten on Twitter. He's responded to people. But Lamar Jackson is a good pocket passer, one of the better ones in the league. I mean, you can look back to his 2019 season. You can look at his highlights in the film. I mean, it is literally there. And the film that they were showing on ESPN was running. So it's like, is there a point trying to be crafted here that they're trying to support with film? Like, I don't really know. But at the end of the day, I think the people who watch him, the people who understand him, and the people who are around him understand and know that he is a wonderful thrower of the football. Again, not perfect. No one is. But again, it makes Lamar Jackson, and that's why he is such a great football player, why he's going to get paid a lot of money, right? He's going to get paid that money. He's going to get paid a big contract. I think he's doing a smart thing for himself and waiting, seeing all these contracts that these quarterbacks are getting. But at the end of the day, it's another take that I think is overused and just old at this point, right? We've seen these things be overused a lot now. And for Lamar Jackson, he's a player where you look at the stats, you look at the film, and again, he's there. He's a good pocket passer. So Lamar Jackson is a player that means everything, everything to the Ravens. He's that important to them. A former MVP. He won that. Why? Because he led the league in touchdown passes, because he had an extremely efficient season throwing and running, because he led the Ravens to a 14-2 record. If he wasn't a good pocket passer, he wouldn't have been able to do that. So the end of the day, again, Lamar Jackson, very good football player, very good pocket passer, and that is that. We'll head into our first break here on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to talk about. We'll talk about if the Ravens should sign Odell Beckham Jr. coming up here, so be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Blue Nile. And whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. And Blue Nile has simple online tools that you choose a diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's Ben jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind. And if you're looking for fine jewelry, but if you're having trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. And I want to tell you a bit about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local auto parts store to stock all the parts you need, so sometimes you have to endure pointless, seemingly intimidating questioning. You got to wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, and you got to choose the brand the warehouse happens to carry. But now you have computers access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. And you can save time and money when using Rock Auto. They're a family business. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, too. So go explore their easy-to-use website to find the solution to your auto parts needs. You go to rockauto.com right now. Check out the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On there. How'd you hear about us? By so know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts of car, wherever you need. rockauto.com. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. And now be sure to go fill out our listener survey. You can take the survey. You have a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. And to take, you go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. And thanks for your help on that. But let's now talk about Odell Beckham Jr. Now, we've talked on this show about if the Ravens should sign Julio Jones and Will Fuller and even Jarvis Landry before he was signed and a bunch of other receivers. Odell Beckham is the guy this week. And this is one that I think a lot of people are split on. And I think it's a very interesting case because, look, we all know the player Odell Beckham is. He's someone who was once regarded as a top 5 receiver in this league for multiple years, got off to an extremely strong start with the Giants and was a 3-time Pro Bowler off the bat in New York and ended up having a great career in New York outside of the fact that it ended up being a bit messy at the end and he gets traded to Cleveland. His Cleveland tenure did not go amazing, or at least not what many expected it to be. Only played about 2.5 years there, then went to the Rams, was a Super Bowl champion, and looked much more like his old self in Los Angeles. But here is the thing. Odell Beckham tore his ACL in the Super Bowl. This is not the first time Odell Beckham has dealt with an ACL tear. He tore it the year prior. He tore it in 2020 in October, was able to come back and play in 2021, but then tore it February 13 in 2022 in the Super Bowl. Now, we talked with Kadri Ismail on Friday about just recovery times and what that looks like when talking about when J.K. Dobbins could come back. Gus Edwards, Marcus Peters. Generally, and this is also based off of other research and everything, but generally, ACL injuries take around 9 to 12 months to fully heal, and recovery times, again, are based off of the situation. So some players come back earlier than that. Some players come back later than that. 7 months would be about the time that it would take from February when he tore his ACL to September, which is the start of the regular season. It's about 7 months. So assuming that he's on the very low end of that recovery time frame of 9 to 12 months, which is 9 months, that'll be a November return. The Ravens like to be cautious with their guys. So if the Ravens sign Odell Beckham, I wouldn't be shocked if even if he's saying, yeah, well, I'm good, I'm feeling like 90%, they would hold him out until December or even the playoffs. That's a boost you'd love getting in the late stages of the year, right? December, January, even hopefully February for them, of course. But what is he doing during the earlier months when the Ravens might need him? He's not doing anything because he's going to be out injured. Most likely, he could come back earlier. I'm not saying he can't, but what is he doing for the team at that point? He's not doing anything. And you also have to look at Odell Beckham's injury history. He's a player that's played in a full season twice, and that was in both 2016 and 2019 for the Browns, and obviously 2016 with the Giants. But he suffered a bunch of different injuries. We're going back to draft sharks. We've done that the past couple weeks with Julio Jones and Will Fuller. Beckham has a 65% chance to miss at least 2 quarters in 2022. I'd up that to 100 or 99 based off of his injury, but he has a 6% chance of an injury per game. His durability out of a 5-point scale is a 2. He's projected to miss 2.3 games in 2022. Again, I'd bump that up. Maybe that's based off a full 17-game season. But again, the 2 ACL tears are what gets it for me, because that's what it is. Plus, it's not like he tore it in October like he did in 2020. This was a February injury. Tyus Bowser tore his Achilles in January, right? We're wondering whether he's going to come back or not at the start of the year, whether he'll play at all in 2022. So it's the same thing with Odell Beckham. And I think an ACL injury, while the medicine has improved and the recovery times have also improved with it, this isn't something to play around with, and the Ravens don't do that. They generally don't play around with those injuries, right? They want to make sure their guys are 100%. So yes, Odell Beckham in his career over the course of his 9 years has established himself again as a really good receiver. 7,367 yards as a receiver, 56 touchdowns. He ends up having a 60.3 catch percentage, 76.7 yards per game. I mean, he's dynamic with the ball in his hands, gets open, good route runner. But then we talk about fit, profile. Odell Beckham is not a big-bodied receiver. He's 5'11", weighs 198 pounds. You can play him in the slot. You can play him outside. But again, as we've talked about before, the Ravens have that specific need in 2 areas, I think. One is the big-body receiver. 2 is the speedster. Odell Beckham is not going to wow you with his speed. He's a fast player, right? But I don't think he's going to wow you and say, oh, this is a home run, deep threat every single time. Like, that's what his role can be. I think Odell Beckham is a bit more redundant, not as redundant as Jarvis Landry, I'd say. But I think that the role that he would play is not one that the Ravens absolutely need on this roster. So talent-wise, you're thinking, oh, yeah, like absolutely bring the guy in, right? He's proven, he's established. But then maybe like, would the Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters feuds have anything to do with this? Like we talked about that with Jarvis Landry too. Like, is there any bad blood there? Is that something the Ravens would want to take on? Is signing an Odell Beckham, let's say he wants to sign for more than the minimum and he wants to have a 1-year prove-it deal type thing, well, then you're putting that cap space into that guy, and that is hindering you from doing other moves, while that player you're investing in Odell Beckham might not be available on the field until, again, November, December, January, February. So if you need to make a move and you wanted to maybe save that cap space, or maybe instead of giving Odell Beckham a random number, $4 million, $5 million, you wanted to give Julio Jones $2 million, or T.Y. Hilton $2 million, or whoever it may be, you have that guy at the start of the year. And I'm not saying those guys won't get injured. I mean, again, at this point in the offseason, it's guys who are injured. It's guys who have had injury histories. So it's not like the Ravens have the absolute cream of the crop to choose from. But I think that for Baltimore, they should be able to find a veteran that is available at the start of the year. If they want to go that route, they have very talented young guys, such as Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, Talon Wallace, guys we've talked about here on the show for many, many times and for many, many hours. I think that for the Ravens, they have those 4, but I still think a veteran receiver is going to do well for the Ravens, and it would do well for the Ravens. It would be an asset for the team. So I think Odell Beckham is a player that has all the talent in the world, but what is he doing? That's the thing I keep going back to. What is he doing for the Ravens? I don't think he would do a lot until he's able to get back 100% healthy. If by some miraculous way he's able to come back in September or early October, then you're thinking, okay, maybe, right? That could be a solid option for him. But if we're talking November, December, January, I don't see the benefit of having him sit on the sideline for the first 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, when the Ravens might need receiver help after that. And they're either taking all that cap and putting it in Odell Beckham and not being able to put it anywhere else, especially if it's a 1-year deal, as opposed to signing a T.Y. Hilton, who might not be as talented as Odell Beckham is on the field. He's still a very talented player, but I think when looking at talent, people would probably take Odell Beckham over T.Y. Hilton, but you have Hilton at the start of the year, and maybe he misses 3 or 4 games here and there, but you're not wondering, all right, what's he going to be like when he comes back off the second ACL, and how is he going to fit in, because we haven't had time to put him in the offense and figure out what his role is yet because he hasn't been on the field. I just think there are too many factors there. I wouldn't be upset if the Ravens brought him in, right? I'm not saying that it would be a disaster if they brought him in and ended up he was their veteran choice. But I just think I'd rather take Julio Jones. I'd rather take Will Fuller. I'd even take T.Y. Hilton at this point. Odell Beckham's probably my number 4 guy. just a lot of uncertainty. If there was more clarity, and it's so unfortunate, right? Because Odell Beckham is so when he's on, like when he's in the right situation, he is good. And we've seen that he is very, very good. But at the same time, you look at the injuries and you just think, well, is this really someone we can trust to be ready by October? And it's not like they shouldn't rush him back, right? It's not like, oh, well, we need you here and we need you ready by week 8, Odell, or else it's not going to work out, right? There shouldn't be a timeline. It should be when Odell Beckham's feeling healthy, he should get on the football field. And when he's feeling right, that should be the time he's back. It shouldn't be, well, the team has to have him by this, and then he's only 75%. And the Ravens wouldn't do that anyway, and I don't think Odell Beckham would listen to that anyway, which he shouldn't. But I just think for me, I'd rather have other guys. I think the ACL injury, based off of when it was suffered, if it was suffered 4 months earlier, I'd be okay with it, right? Because then you know that at least he'll be able to come back and potentially be there by the mid-October date. But I think if the Ravens were to sign a veteran, it would be, at least in my opinion, my preference would be someone who would be ready to start the season. I just don't think Odell Beckham will be ready to start the season. Maybe he proves me wrong, and honestly, I hope he does. I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he's healthy. I want all these guys. I want every player healthy at this NFL level. Although I know that is very unrealistic. I don't wish injury upon anybody. Right? That's a terrible thing to do. So I think for Baltimore, a proven guy who is ready to start the year is better than a proven guy who's not ready to start the year. And for me, Odell Beckham, I just don't see a situation. There may be one or two situations out of a lot of situations where I see him starting the year healthy and 100% ready to go. And plus just the role that he would fill, I just don't think it's exactly what the Ravens need. There are better free agent options at the position to fill those needs and fill those roles. So for me, should the Ravens sign Odell Beckham? My personal answer would be no. That's where I'm headed with that, because just the injury situation is a bit too unknown for me at this point. But we'll head into our final break here on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to talk about. When we get back, we'll be diving in to a bit of a schedule tidbit for the Ravens and talk about their travel schedule. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Bet Online and the NBA Finals. All tied up 1-1, and BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting stats and info. You can find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including the finals in the NBA, the conference finals in the NHL. You have Major League Baseball regular season, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing as well. BetOnline is a continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. That's the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On NFL. I hosted the Monday show over there again, so be sure to check me out if you want to hear me talk for another 30 minutes with hosts around our network. Let's now talk about the Ravens schedule. Yeah, the Ravens schedule was released a couple weeks ago, but there's an interesting tidbit, and CBS Sports had an article about this, very interesting one from John Breach, and he talked about travel miles. So how far each team will actually travel in 2022 based off of their opponents in terms of road games and home games put side by side. So the number one team in the league is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All the way down at 31 here, the Ravens will travel 8,244 miles. The only team below them is the Steelers at 6,512. And there are a couple like disclaimers here, like there are multiple teams that are supposed to combine 2 road trips into one, and that's been taken into account. So some numbers might be different elsewhere, but this is what CBS Sports has. The Ravens, though, a bottom 3 team in travel miles. But the interesting thing is that the NFL released the same stats for last year, and the Baltimore Ravens were number 5 on that list based off estimated travel miles with 12,963. So that compared to their number, so what was it, 12,963 compared to their number in 2022, which is 8,244. The Ravens are traveling around 4,000 less miles this year than they did last year. In Baltimore's schedule last year, again, like we saw the crazy wackiness that happened on their schedule. Obviously, the big part of that was the Cleveland thing, where they had to play Cleveland at home, then the next week travel to Pittsburgh, then the next week travel to Cleveland, whereas Cleveland had Baltimore away, then a bye, and then Baltimore at home. So that was one thing that was not in the Ravens' favor whatsoever. But then you also just had weird road trips to it, like 2 games in a row on the road. Then you'd have long home stands, like from October 11th to November 7th, the Ravens were at home. They had 4 straight games at home, including their bye week. They were home for over a month straight. But then you had, 2 games against Detroit and Denver on the road back-to-back, Miami, Chicago on the road back-to-back, Pittsburgh, Cleveland on the road back-to-back, and they finished with 3 of their final 4 at home. It was just very different, I think, than what we've seen recently from the Ravens and their schedules. But this year in 2022, it's a lot more balanced, I would say. You don't have a lot of those double on the road. In fact, the Ravens only have 2 of those double on the road games. They finished with 3 of their last 5 away, but you have a couple games at home in a row, week 4 and 5, and obviously there's none of that Cleveland stuff. So the Ravens, the farthest they'll really have to go here when looking at actually where they'll have to travel to. I mean, they have to travel to Tampa Bay, they have to travel to New Orleans, go down to Jacksonville. So they're traveling down south a lot, but they're not going all the way out west. They'll travel to New York twice to play the Jets and the Giants. They obviously go to New England as well, and then other than that, you got Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. So they're not traveling all the way out west. Like when the Ravens had to play Seattle out west and they had to play the Rams out west in 2019, that was a lot of travel miles, right? They had to do a lot of traveling then. And obviously with travel miles, it's an advantage to have when you don't have to travel all that. You don't have to prep and just be on the road or be in the air a ton. It gives you time to, just have these short little trips there and back. It's exhausting to travel. I mean, especially for a whole team having to get all that stuff together. This is when you got to be on the plane. This is the hotel. You can't sleep in your own bed, or you're doing all this, or it's just a 5-hour plane ride as opposed to a 2-hour bus ride. Those things matter, and the rest matters and everything. So when teams are getting in back home from West Coast trips at like 4 a.m., it's rough. And some teams stay the day after. So there's all these different things that factor into a team traveling less versus traveling more. And the Buccaneers, who, again, I mentioned were the top traveling team this season, traveled 26,562 miles. That is more than the Lions, the Ravens, and the Steelers combined this year. And the Steelers have been a team that don't have to travel a ton, and they haven't traveled a ton a lot of the time, and that has helped them out. There are stats that help out and that say that part of the schedule, little things here and there where you could say, well, does that really have a huge impact on how things work? Is it really that important that X team doesn't travel X amount of miles? I think it is. Is it the difference between all these wins and losses? And if the Ravens had the number 1 travel miles, are they finishing 6-11 or something? No, I don't think that's what it is. But I do think it helps out just over the course of a season, not being exhausted and being tired out from all those long plane rides and long road trips. And plus, I just think the Ravens schedule just looks a bit better this year, right? Like the Cleveland thing, I keep going back to it because it was unbelievable how the schedule made that work. And look, some things go in your favor, some things don't. The Ravens coaches and executives have talked about that before, John Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta. But I still think that without that in the picture, you have a lot of different aspects where you say, well, you know what, that 2-game homestand against Buffalo and Cincinnati early, that's big to have at home. To have Atlanta and Pittsburgh back-to-back at home in week 16 and 17, to be able to have that kind of recharge time without having to travel, that's important too. But then you also have Pittsburgh and Cleveland away, weeks 14 and 15. So it's not like the Ravens don't have to travel at all this year. Like they're still going to places. They're still going to have to stay in hotels. They're still going to have to figure out all the logistics stuff. But it's a lot better than I think it was in 2021. And again, 4,000 miles less. So again, interesting tidbits in the schedule that I just kind of like to point out here and there. Again, it's not something that's going to contribute to the Ravens having a terrible season versus a great season, right? I think their talent will speak for itself. They're a team that has gone on the road in many big situations, won many big games, even with the travel. But again, there are stats to back up that, you know what, there is a little advantage to having that travel schedule being a bit less intense than other teams. And so I'm excited to see how the Ravens will perform this year. Obviously, with the Ravens being a bottom 5 team in travel miles last year and still having an 8-9 record, people will say, well, look, they had it last year and it didn't do anything. I don't anticipate the Ravens being as injured this year and having to deal with, like when they traveled to Chicago, Lamar Jackson was on that plane curled up in a ball, and the Ravens were thinking, are we going to be able to start Lamar Jackson, or is it going to be Tyler Huntley? And they were trying to figure that out when they were getting to the hotels and figuring it out instead of being at their facility figuring it out there, which, again, like they can do it on the road. They won that game, right? They did it. But Stuff is just a little easier, I think, when you can do it at home and when you don't have to travel all the miles back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And plus, you're not injured too, right? That helps a little bit. So 8-9 with the fifth least travel miles, not a great record, but I think being a lot healthier this year, at least I'm hoping that's the case. Baltimore will be able to use that travel schedule to their advantage in 2022. But that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be talking about more Ravens talk, of course. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you tomorrow.